and then you basically sure have a single payer system. Now, the president, I believe, is being disingenuous when he says, if you like your health care plan, you can keep it. Well, you can, so long as your employer continues to provide it. And therein lies the devil of the details, if you will. There are a number of problems with the bill as it stands that I think many of my Democratic colleagues were not aware of prior to this kind of exploration that's gone on over the first 2 weeks. You've heard some discussion about things like end-of-life counselors. Let me address this because I've got a lot of questions about end-of-life counselors. There are a lot of things in the bill that aren't specified. In other words, it establishes a program and it establishes a goal, but how you get there is not defined. And it's done for a reason. I've had people, constituents, get a copy of the bill and they read it, and then they call me up and they say, Congressman Schock, this subsection of this page here, it leaves this blank, it doesn't explain. Well, of course, it's done for a reason, because if it's not specified, if it's not codified into law, it's left up to rulemaking to do the administration. So the more open we leave the bill, the more latitude the administration has to design the program however they wish, however the people at Health and Human Services wish. Many of us don't believe that's responsible lawmaking on our part. After all, you ought to be able to hold us accountable for what bill we draft, and we ought to draft the bill, right or wrong, good or imperfect. We ought to be a part of setting that policy. It's one of our responsibilities as a member of Congress. So things like end-of-life counselors, it doesn't specify what their exact role will be. So you have people out there saying, well, these people are going to promote euthanasia, these people are going to, very scary tactic, very scary thoughts out there. And then you have people on the left saying, oh, that's just fear-mongering, that's not true, that's not our intention. But the point is, it's not specified. So, many of us are concerned about adding things like end-of-life counselors to a bill whose goal is to control costs. So how do you counsel end-of-life and control costs? I mean, again, I'm not saying what it's meant to be say, I'm just saying it doesn't say. So what you're going to have is a lot of Democrats come back once they've actually had time to review the bill. Many of them have been basically taken by the president's popularity, by his charisma, by his ability to get a following. And so they say, well, for the sake of the party, for the sake of politics, we better go along with them. And that's what they did on stimulus. That's what they did on omnibus. That's what they did on the bailouts, and that's what they did on cap and trade. And I think what's been healthy the first 2 weeks is that it's caused them to slow down and say, you know what, maybe we didn't really know what all was in this bill, and maybe we ought to try and make it better. So I don't know how soon something will pass, but I think whatever passes will be much better than what is there now. And for all the talk about Republicans being the party to know, Republicans stopping this or that, I'm here to tell you folks, Republicans can't stop anything, because the Democrats have a 50-seat majority. So if this was a partisan issue, the issue would be over. The only people that have stopped this are the American people. People in Democratic congressional districts who rightfully so are upset with what's in the bill, upset with the process, and have weighed in and caused the Democrat members to put the brakes on it. What we as Republican members of Congress have been able to do is get on TV shows, get on radio shows, and help carry the message. And I believe we are winning the air war at this point. But as far as when the bill will pass and what will be in it, I can't tell you when that will be, but I can tell you I think it will be much better as a result of this August recess. Yes?
Aaron, how do you go about, you get thrown an 1,100-page document on your desk, and you're given a 10, 12-hour, up to a 2-day window to digest that? How do you go about doing that with any proficiency?
He asked, how do I go about reading an 11-page, 100-page document when it's given to me with 24 or 48 hours? The simple answer is you don't. I mean, you don't read a document that big in that short a time. It's physically not possible. And I think that is what, as the American people find out about this, again, it's not a Republican or Democrat issue. They are grossed by the process and really the abuse of power. And this is something new. This isn't the way Congress has always been. And I just had this news conference with the members of the media, some of them said, oh, you know, this is partisan, you know, the Republicans ran it this way when they were in control. No. When the Democrats had Congress last time, and they had a Democrat in the White House, and the last champion for health care was Hillary Clinton, and they had Hillary Care. That bill, Hillary Care, was in the Ways and Means Committee, which is the tax writing committee in Congress, for 17 days. With a Democrat in the White House, Democrat in Congress, they took 17 days to debate the bill in committee before it ever went to the House. This bill had less than 17 hours in the House Ways and Means Committee. So there is the abuse of power now with this Congress and this president has gotten people so upset that is why you're starting to see the outrage about, let's slow this down, let's make sure we get this right. This is too big of an issue to screw up and to affect me personally in my health care. The back.
Aaron, you mentioned defensive medicine. Why isn't anybody talking about tort reform, malpractice reform? Is there anything in this bill dealing with that issue?
No, and we are. We have 4 bills, Republican proposals, that we have filed that are in text form. They're not 1,100 pages. They're much easier to read. There are 3 fundamental things that the Republican conference wants. And let me tell you, many of us are willing to vote for a health reform bill. Many of us believe we need to do something. Many of us know there won't be a perfect bill. But there are 3 fundamental things we expect from any bill to get Republican votes. One of them is tort reform. When I met with the Consulate General of Canada, and I talked to him about his plan in Canada, he says to me, Aaron, one thing you guys haven't figured out is it's too easy to sue a doctor in your country. And I said, yeah, I agree. And he says, well, the fundamental part of our healthcare bill in Canada, in the controlling costs, was to cut down on all the frivolous lawsuits in Canada. He says it's very difficult now to sue a doctor unless you've got true cause. We don't give these huge runaway settlements for pain and suffering. And I said, really? I said, I'd like to see the text of that bill that you passed. He says, well, I can get it to you. And he said, in fact, the attorneys that wrote our law are from a firm in Chicago. So even countries who have a single-payer socialized system know you have to do away with frivolous lawsuits and you need tort reform. There isn't anything in this 1,100-page document that deals with tort reform. Second, we believe you need regulatory reform. This means things like allowing small businesses to basically couple together and buy health insurance plans across state lines. Right now, you buy your car insurance anywhere in the country. Probably some people in this room buy their car insurance from a green lizard in Maryland, Geico. Okay, you can buy your car insurance from any of the carriers in the country. Not so with healthcare. State of New Jersey, on the average, per person's health insurance plans, premiums, are $3,500 more an individual. So, regulatory reform, part and parcel of any plan that we would support. And third, cutting down on fraud, waste, and abuse. Private health insurance carriers like United Healthcare, Humana, and others have departments within their companies, for obvious reasons, that focus on fraud, waste, and abuse. Why? Because they're a profitable company and it's to their benefit to make sure there's not abuse within the healthcare system. There is a huge amount of fraud, waste, and abuse within the Medicare program. And CBO, which is the Congressional Budget Office, which is a nonpartisan group, scored the president's plan, House Bill 3200. And usually they give an amount. For example, the plan that the president has proposed is going to cost over $1 trillion. Okay, so they put scores in. The CBO didn't even score his bill on fraud, waste, and abuse because they said it was so minimal it didn't warrant an amount. Now, anybody who's studied this issue knows we can make great gains with fraud, waste, and abuse on Medicare just by putting in some of the same safety mechanisms that private health insurers and carriers, third-party administrators use to make sure that people aren't double billing and billing for services not rendered and so on. So fraud, waste, and abuse, tort reform, regulatory reform are 3 very simple things that are not mentioned anywhere in the 1,100-page bill that we have now and are fundamental to all 4 of the Republican proposals that are filed now